Oi gente, tudo bem? Pra quem não me conhece, eu sou o Romir e você está na Romir Playhouse. E hoje eu vou fazer uma entrevista. E é uma entrevista, bom, a dica tá aqui do meu ladinho, olha aqui ó. É uma entrevista com o autor tanto da Iniciativa quanto do Star Wars Rebellion e também do Battlestar Galactica. É o Corey Konieczka. Ele era um autor que trabalhou durante muitos anos para a Fantasy Fly e ele saiu da Fantasy Fly em torno de 2020 para fundar a empresa dele, a Unexpected Games, que está publicando já alguns jogos, já tem 2 jogos publicados, um deles já saiu no Brasil, o segundo vai sair em breve, que é o Voices in My Head, e que ele já está trabalhando, já vai ter demo do jogo nele, o 3000 Scoundrels, em Essen, na feira de Essen esse ano. Então vamos lá dar uma olhadinha, dar uma conversada com ele? Corey, first of all, many thanks for your time for this interview, okay? And I think, I know because I already make a research, but how we speak your name?
We pronounce it Konieczka. I don't know. So it's a Polish name, and so if I lived in Poland, maybe they would pronounce it differently, but that's the way we pronounce it here, at least.
It's a very unusual name, and I heard a lot of people pronouncing in very different ways around the globe.
Yes, I think the worst pronunciation I ever heard was Konieczka, which doesn't make any sense. There's not even a W in there.
But going to the board game part of the interview, how you started in the board game world?
Sure. I mean, I've been playing games, designing games my whole life. Like as a kid, I have 2 brothers, and we would always be making up games together, sometimes board games, sometimes sports we could play outside, all sorts of different things. And when I was maybe about 12 years old, I started doing some computer programming, and I started making video games. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to make video games for a living. That's going to be my life. So I started doing that. I took it pretty seriously, took a lot of programming. Then I went to college for computer science because I thought that would be the best way for me to, learn how to make video games. Turns out that wasn't the case at all. I learned very quickly that if I stayed there and did that, I would probably be programming bank software for the rest of my life. So I'm like, oh, I can't do this. So I decided to not major in computer science. I ended up going back to school for graphic design instead, which was also a way that I could use computers and be creative. And on the side, I was, playing games still. I was also making games that I was playing with my friends just for fun. I never really had any intention of selling anything. And then I got into Twilight Imperium 3rd edition, which Fantasy Flight Games was releasing. I saw it on their website. I'm like, wow, that game looks amazing. I've never seen a game that epic and that crazy. And so it's the first board game I ever pre-ordered. It came in the mail. I played it with all my friends, and I started designing some homebrew rules and stuff. Got really into it. And lo and behold, Fantasy Flight posted on their website that they were looking for a game designer. And I'm like, hey, I could do that. That would be so cool if I could do that as my job. So I sent in a resume. I sent in the homebrew Twilight Imperium rules that I made. I had no idea that the designer of the game was going to read them and scrutinize them. I don't know if I would have sent them in if I knew that, but I think it's a good thing I did, because eventually I got the job, and that's kind of what started it all. That was in 2005.
2005, a long time ago. And
yeah.
your first game at Fantasy Flight was the Warrior Knights, with 3 other designers. Among them, the Bruno Faiducci was designing also. But your first solo game was the Battlestar Galactica, in 2008, I think.
I think StarCraft might have came before that. It's been a long time.
It's a long time. But how was to going from group designing or working with others to going to design your own solo games? How was this process?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think so. A lot of the first projects I worked on at Fantasy Flight Game was just assisting stuff. So it was a good way to learn the ropes and to learn, like, how does this even work? What are the steps of the process when you're making an actual game that's going to be published? And so the first project I worked on at Fantasy Flight Games was actually the World of Warcraft board game. When I started, they were almost done with that game. They were just kind of wrapping up the final design. And I was brought in to help design some cards. I was designing items. I was designing bosses. And so I was just kind of adding content to the game. And that was super cool at the time. I remember sitting at my desk just like rolling dice and pretending to like fight against a boss just to kind of test it myself. And I'm like, I'm getting paid to play a game. But each project that I worked on was kind of a step to learning a new skill, to learning how to do a new thing. And so I learned that. And then my project after that was the new edition of Britannia, which is an old loose Pulsifer game. And I wasn't doing any design on that game. I was just producing it. And so I was helping an old game design. I was helping modernize it a little bit, not too much, and working with an outside designer. And then kind of the step after that was doing Warrior Knights, where we actually had a previous edition. Bruno Feduti had done a redesign, and then they wanted me to do another redesign. And so, yeah, I was just kind of learning new skills each time along the way until eventually designing my own game. But I mean, at FFG, everything was collaboration, right? Like even games like StarCraft, Christian Peterson's one of the designers listed on there. He came up with some of the mechanics, and all of the people who play tested and worked on it. It's a big group effort. It's a big company.
Very nice. And how was your time in Fantasy Flight? How was the process that Fantasy Flight used?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it there. It was a job like anything else, right? You've got stresses, you've got deadlines, you've got all those normal things that you have to worry about. But I got to do what I loved. I got to make a lot of friends. I think the toughest part is just all of the pressure that you have when the company is investing a lot of money to print and produce a game. We've got a lot of, we do our best to make a game that's going to have a good set of rules, not going to have typos in it, it's going to be complete, and also it's going to be fun. And people have different tastes, and so you never know when you're working on a game, like, how people are going to receive it when it comes out. And so that was kind of a whole nother layer of stress. We're not only making the game for us, we're making the game for the community.
Yeah, and one thing that I think is very unique of your games, at least the games that I used to play from your invention, is that they are deeply entangled with the history behind them. For instance, if you play Battlestar Galactica, I can really feel inside this series. I can really, it's really there. If you play here, Rebellion is a very narrative. Is everything there. The Imperial Assault also. The first edition of Mansion of Madness. Was you a fan from this franchising or for these things before you start to making a game for it, or Fantasy Flight bring you a task? We need a game from Battlestar Galactica, and you learn everything about it.
Yeah, I mean, I love storytelling. I mean, I'm an avid reader. I've dabbled in writing, and I just love the process of like experiencing a story in a new way. And for the most part, I was a huge fan of the different IPs. Like, I grew up loving Star Wars, absolutely. I got really into Battlestar Galactica. Like, we used to get together and have like parties to watch episodes together at the company. It was great. And so when you love something that much, it's easy to put it into the theme. Like, ultimately it came down to like, how did this show or movie make you feel? And how can we make the players kind of feel the same way and feel like they're embodying these characters? For for Battlestar Galactica in particular, I remember a few moments. I remember, first of all, going through the list of characters and saying, all right, how many characters do we want in the game? And let's write about what each of their strengths and weaknesses are. What are they good at, and what's their kind of character flaw? Because that's a big part of the TV show. Like, these people feel like three-dimensional people. They have, you're rooting for them. They're the humans. They're important, but they've got their issues. They've got their flaws. Some of them have drinking problems. Some of them have anger issues. And so it was important for me to kind of bring that into the game, as not only is your character good at something, they're also bad at something. There's something you have to worry about. And I think, honestly, just capturing the story just comes down to loving it and knowing it inside and out. There were a couple of a couple of situations where I did work on a game for an IP I didn't necessarily know as well. One example was Game of Thrones, the board game. I made the Storm of Swords expansion for that. I had never read Game of Thrones. My boss was like, hey, we're making another expansion for this game. I want you to do it. I'm like, okay. He hands me a copy of the first book, and I started reading it. But it was at the time when we're making the Storm of Swords expansion, so this is an expansion about like the third or fourth book, and I hadn't caught up that far, and so it was a lot of like reading people's like cliff notes and like, what are the key important things? And there were a ton of people in FFG that knew the IP in and out, the team that was working on the Game of Thrones card game, and they loved Game of Thrones, and so I leaned on them a lot. I'm like, okay, how are we going to capture this theme? What's this got to look like? But yeah, that's the majority of my process. Ultimately, the story is just so important. I feel like if I'm playing a game, I want it to be more than just making an efficient engine or going through the motions to get more victory points. I want there to be like a reason, and I want there to be a story behind it.
Yeah, and that's what I see, for instance, in the initiative that is here behind me. The initiative is published here in Brazil. I'm playing with my family, and the storytelling behind them is amazing. It's fantastic to discover the things when the game develops itself. Yeah, and that brings to my other question. I think in 2020 you leave the Fantasy Flight to ground your own company, the Unexpected Games. Yeah, what was your motivation to do this and to make this risk, and what are the challenges that you are facing with your own company?
Yeah, it was back in 2019 we started. I was working at Fantasy Flight, and honestly it was difficult to leave because like I loved it there and I loved working with all those people, but I felt like I'd been doing the same thing for almost 10 years, and I felt like, all right, I want to find a way to challenge myself and do something a bit different. I had a lot of ideas for games that I had just written down over the years that were never going to get published at Fantasy Flight. They were just not a good fit for the company. The Initiative was the first one where it's like, I really want to make this game at some point, but if I stay at Fantasy Flight, I'm never going to get a chance to. It's just not going to be a good fit for them. Also, I wanted to kind of learn and grow. Like I explained when I started at FFG, I kept doing new tasks and learning new things and kind of growing as a designer, growing as an individual. And I talked to my boss at FFG and at Asmodee, and I said, hey, listen, what do you think of me starting up a new studio? Because to me, it feels like the thing that I think I could really add as a new studio is focusing on innovation, focusing on things that are going to be unique and different than the games that are out there. And I'd like to really experiment, and I'd like to have your support in doing that. And he ended up saying, sure, that sounds great. And so we worked out a deal, and I was able to start my own company. I'm still part of Asmodee, so they still do all the printing and sales and international distribution, and they help out in so many different ways, which means even though I'm the only person in the studio at the moment, I still get a lot of help. But yeah, it was a big transition. I'm still learning a lot.
And but your first two games for Unexpected Games was actually, in my point of view, a success. Yeah, they are really the name of the company make the games. They are really unexpected. It's really unique, different from what we are used from your games. So those ideas are already in your time from Fantasy Flight. Those ideas came from Fantasy Flight already.
So the initiative did. I had kind of bits and pieces of the initiative were ideas that I was kind of thinking of in the background. Like I wanted to make a game that had a comic book that told the story and was about kind of code breaking, puzzle solving, and had hidden surprises in it. Those were kind of the depths of the idea. I had the idea of the story, that there were these teenagers that found a board game, but I hadn't actually designed the game yet until I started my own studio. Voices in my head was a little different. I try to find some time every once in a while to make different prototypes, just to, when I'm inspired by an idea, could this turn into a game? Is there anything interesting here? And so with Voices in my head, I don't even know where this idea came from, but it was definitely the story first. I had the idea that, like, all right, I'd like to do a story that's about somebody on trial for a crime. And what if we are all the competing emotions and thoughts inside this person's head? Because anybody in a stressful situation like that would be really stressed out. They'd be questioning themselves. Should I confess? Should I not? And so I wanted to kind of find a way to replicate that in a board game. And it sounded really unique and interesting. And I pitched it to my boss. He's like, yeah, that sounds really cool. You should do that. And so I made that game. In fact, Voices in my head and my next game, 3000 Scoundrels, I started designing both of those games around the same time. I came up with both of those ideas probably 2020. I was kind of playing around with those ideas, and they eventually turned into games.
And what can you tell about your next, the 30,000 Scoundrels? What you can tell us about them?
Yeah. So the name of the game is 3000 Scoundrels because there's 3,000 different combinations of characters that can show up in the game. And they're all made of a trait card and a clear job card. And so the trait card tells you when you can use the card. The job card tells you what it does. They combine together, and they've got a combined cost. They've got artwork that's kind of a two-part artwork. One of them is the head and the hand. The other one's like the clothing. And so each of these 3,000 characters, they have a unique name. You could have the generous judge, and they've got unique artwork, unique abilities. The game itself, it's kind of there's some light engine building in it, but it's there's a lot of bluffing as well. The story is that a time traveler from the future's come back to the Wild West, and he brought back all this future technology with him, and he's trying to basically use this technology to enrich himself in the past. And so he's using this technology to invent new stuff. He's been doing this for a few years, and then he mysteriously vanishes. Nobody knows if he's alive or dead, but we take on the four most influential people in town, and we feel like it's our job to fill in this power vacuum. And so we are kind of trying to steal all of the technology that he's left behind to use for our own purposes. In order to do that, we need to hire these scoundrels. We're kind of building a gang of people that are going to help us steal this technology, help us find information, help us gain money so that we can fund our efforts. And over the course of 3 days, you're playing cards, sometimes lying about what cards you're playing. You're keeping an eye on your opponents to try to catch them lying. You're stealing these technologies that have been left behind. And basically whoever steals the most powerful ones at the end wins.
Nice. And one not game related question. Do you have any hobbies outside of this board game world?
Yeah, I love reading. Right now I'm reading Stephen King's new novel. It's really good. I like movies, video games. Yeah, those are the big ones.
Very nice. Good. Thanks a lot for your time. Yeah, and can you send us a greeting for your Brazilian fans that will see this interview?
Sure. Well, I just want to thank you all for your support. Thank you for playing my games and letting us publish them in Brazil. I mean, if you guys weren't buying them, then our publisher in Brazil wouldn't be so excited to bring everything over to you, and we couldn't make it work without you.
Bom, gente, eu espero que vocês tenham gostado da entrevista. Se vocês gostaram, deixe de curtir aqui ela, tá bom? E também não deixe de se inscrever no canal, tá? A gente sempre tem postado vídeo de regras de unboxing e, ocasionalmente, a gente posta aqui também entrevistas. Um grande abraço e até a próxima!